source. In these precious final moments of what could be one of the closest elections in U.S. history, Donald Trump is not dialing back his rhetoric in some last-minute bid to reach those elusive, undecided voters tonight. Instead, we're seeing the former president actually doubling down and repeating the violent language that he first used last night when he was talking about one of his most prominent Republican critics, Liz Cheney.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy.
Now, the backlash to the language that he used there was almost immediate, not just from Democrats. We heard from some Republicans as well. And while the Trump campaign is defending the argument he was making there about U.S. involvement in foreign wars and who makes those decisions, the candidate himself is still repeating it, almost using the exact same language, though he softened it to a degree just a few moments ago.
Kamala's campaigning with warmongers like Liz Cheney. Every time I was with her in the White House, we should attack this nation, that nation. Nations that people never even heard of, we should attack. She's a big tough guy, you know, she's a big tough one. She's a tough one. But if you gave Liz Cheney a gun and put her into battle facing the other side with guns pointing at her, she wouldn't have the courage or the strength or the stamina to even look the enemy in the eye. She, like Kamala, is a stupid person.
Of course, Donald Trump himself deferred going to Vietnam and avoided it. We should note that was a big part of his campaign in 2016. But we'll get to that argument that he's making there in a moment. We also heard response today, right after he made these comments last night, Vice President Harris weighing in, arguing that what Donald Trump said about one of his most ardent critics is ultimately disqualifying from this race.
He has increased his violent rhetoric, Donald Trump has, about political opponents, and in great detail, suggested rifles should be trained on former Representative Liz Cheney. This must be disqualifying. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States who uses that kind of violent rhetoric is clearly disqualified and unqualified to be president.
Now, Liz Cheney herself is also weighing in here. I'm going to read you her full statement in just a moment. But I should note tonight, as we come on the air, Arizona's Democratic Attorney General says that her office is looking into whether those comments that you heard from Donald Trump constitute a death threat under state law. All of this is happening tonight as at this hour, what you're looking at right now, Harris and Trump are just miles apart from one another, both stumping in the Milwaukee area as they are making those final arguments to voters. My political sources are here. And Gretchen, when you look at this, just even from a political perspective, as Trump is out, on the campaign trail where he's repeating these comments to voters tonight, I just think, we're 4 days away. It's one of the closest races ever. And there has to be some political strategist who is saying, these last minute voters, the undecided voters, the ones who did not vote early but are likely making their decisions in the next few days. I don't think that those comments are necessarily, going after Liz Cheney are bringing them into the camp.
Well, I think that his people have said that many times over the last years and weeks. It's really hard to reel him in. I will tell you that my inside sources in the Harris campaign are saying that they do believe that the Madison Square debacle and then these comments that late voters are going in her area now. They're going over to her as a result of these comments. Normally, I don't think anything moves the needle, but I think this late in the game, people are looking at it. If they haven't decided, they're going more on emotion.
Yeah.
And if they see something like this and it really triggers them in one direction or another, then they may vote for Harris instead of Trump.
Yeah, and it's hard to know because, nothing has been able to move this race in the last few months. It's a question of the undecideds and what is going to move them. But TW, just on the language itself, I understand the argument that the Trump team is making. They're saying he was talking about, involvement in foreign war, something he's been against. But he could have said that without using such violent imagery about, guns being fired upon someone who's a huge critic of his.
Perhaps, and I think the second time he did it was a little softer. And look, I'm the biggest critic of Donald Trump's rhetoric and his demeanor most of the time, always have been. When I woke up this morning, though, and read headlines accusing him of wanting to put Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad, I spit out my coffee and I wasn't even drinking any. So I went back and I watched all 8 minutes. I don't even like a politician to talk for 5, never mind 8, but I listened to it. And it was a classic weave of criticism. And I thought I was listening to a speech from the 2004 Democratic National Convention. I was there, and everyone accused Cheney and Bush of not having skin in the game, their kids having guns trained at them while our boys and girls were over there. That was very heartfelt at the time, and it still is today. And the point Donald Trump was making was that leaders like Liz Cheney, who is hawkish, and I love the Cheneys and Bushes, should think twice before they put people in harm's way. And the bigger point I want to make about this is there is so much to go after Donald Trump for. And I know that the imagery of a barrel trained at her head is tough. He should know that. But when people hear firing squad and then actually listen to what he said, people are going to, next time they say Donald Trump said something crazy, they're going to assume, well, did he actually say that?
But Liz Cheney, didn't send anyone into war. She was an assistant secretary of state. You can make the arguments. I mean, Donald Trump was actually commander in chief. But someone who knows violence. I mean, he had 2 assassination attempts against him, Jamal. And I just think of, J.D. Vance saying this week after the garbage comment from President Biden that everyone should tone down their rhetoric. I mean, that is not toned down rhetoric. Regardless if you agree with the argument, it's not the argument, it's the rhetoric around it, the way he argued it.
Right. It's not toned down rhetoric. We've seen Steve Scalise. Nancy Pelosi was on with Jake earlier talking about this being kind of the 2nd-year anniversary of the attack at her house that went to her where her husband was injured. Donald Trump himself has gone through this. Why are we talking about training guns at politicians' heads? This doesn't make any sense to me. One, it doesn't make sense because it's a bad thing to do. But 2, you're running for office. Why are you attacking somebody who's not on the ballot? Right? I mean, this is like classic campaign tactics. You don't argue as the candidate. Staff can argue amongst each other. Surrogates can argue amongst each other. Why is the candidate attacking someone who's not on the ballot?
I think that
it's a bad use of candidate time, and it reminds people of the trauma, I think, the collective trauma that people had during the Trump years, which was all of this sort of chaos.
Well,
it was all back in full color over the last week, and I think voters are starting to turn away.
And I mentioned Liz Cheney's statement. She said, this is how dictators destroy free nations. They threaten those who speak against them with death. We cannot entrust our country and our freedom to a petty, vindictive, cruel, unstable man who wants to be a tyrant.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think one of the main concerns of a lot of Americans is, what does this incite? I mean, we can sit here all day long and say we're weary of all these comments by Trump, which so many people are, even this close to the election. But what is it doing to other people who are listening to this? Does that incite violence in them? I mean, that's been the accusation about the assassination attempts against Trump, right? That he said the left was inciting that. And so it's going both ways, arguably. But I worry about what this does to people sitting at home who are listening to him, and then they go out and do something violent.
Well, and all this is coming as Tuesday night, which I feel like everyone is kind of bracing for. What's it going to look like? Jamal, we were told today that the Harris campaign, they expect Donald Trump is going to come out and declare victory. I mean, obviously there's a playbook for that because he did it in 2020. But if you're in the Harris campaign, how do you handle that?
Well, first of all, you need everybody to wait so we count all the votes, right? Like, we just can't have an election that's settled or people start making predictions. Even people at places like this start making predictions until we know what all the votes are. I was reminded this week from my friends in Nevada of what happened when Catherine Cortez Masto ran for the Senate the last time. They thought that she was losing. 36,000 absentee ballots came in and she surged ahead and she won. Right? We got to take our time. It's all going to work out. It's going to take us a few days to figure it out, but we're all going to know.
And it doesn't mean, though, that anything's wrong, how the counting goes. Some states just count slower. And so, TW, we were talking about this because this is something that I asked Doug Burgum about last night. He's going to be at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday night. And so the question was, are you going to advise him to just wait, let the ballots be counted? But it's also, the Doug Burgums of the world who are going to be there. And also Steve Bannon, who, when he got out of prison this week, said actually Donald Trump should have declared it sooner in 2020. Listen to this.
I thought he should do it last year in 2020 at 11 o'clock at night, not at 2:30 in the morning.
If you're around him on Tuesday, will you encourage him to wait until all the results are in and the ballots have been counted?
Well, I think on Tuesday night, what I'm optimistic for this country is that we're gonna know the victory on Tuesday night, and not a day later, 2 days later, weeks later. It's not going to change overnight. So you're asking a hypothetical. I don't think that hypothetical is going to come true. I think we're going to know the winner on Tuesday night.
Well, it's not a hypothetical. It happened in 2020, and Rudy Giuliani told Donald Trump to go out there and declare victory. It's a real question of what they're telling him to do behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, respond necessarily to Steve Bannon.
But why
I think
couldn't
he
Burgum
should.
just say, yeah, I do think he should wait. Burgum has never come out and declared victory early when he's run for governor of North Dakota.
They're trying to work the rest, Caitlin. They're trying to work the rest. This is all about setting the tone so that they can then say something's been taken from them that hasn't been taken.
I think they're also hoping to drive out the vote so it's definitive on the day of, and I hope that is the case. I don't think it should drag on. I don't think it's good for the country to have elections that drag on for days in terms of waiting for results. I would advise the president to wait until it's definitive. But look, this is a 50-50 toss-up race. There's going to probably be some states that are dragged out a little bit longer, but expediency is a good thing in a democracy.
But let's be clear that Donald Trump in the last week has gone to Nevada and said that it was rigged there. And he also has gone to Pennsylvania and talked about the fact that there are voter fraud issues going on there already. And there were in Lancaster County, where 2,500 ballots or signups for being able to vote were being looked at and investigated right now. But there's no evidence of fraud right now. And my concern is he's laying the groundwork for Tuesday night to start saying that this election was rigged.
My bigger concern with that, and I'll go with you on that, is, again, turnout. When people hear it's fraudulent ahead of time, they're less likely to turn out if they don't think their vote's going to matter. And on the flip side of that, you have, like right now in Maryland, there is a pro-Democrat group sending text messages out to Republicans that is saying that Larry Hogan supported or honored the election of 2020 as though it's a bad thing to turn Republicans away from voting for Larry Hogan. So here you go with Democrats, and you got to respect an election and then paying to sow doubt.
I get it. You're complaining, though, about Democrats telling voters something that is a factual truth. That's very different That's very different than telling people something that is like the election is not going to happen on
But like that you won
we
your
won an
to their
election that
doubt.
we didn't win.
They're playing to their doubt, which is dangerous.
Yeah, but so is telling people you won New Mexico when you didn't twice.
I agree with
Lost it
you.
by
I'm with
over
you.
100,000 votes combined. Everyone, thank you so much. Stand by, because up next, we're going to talk to Donald Trump's former national security advisor. Trump referenced him by name tonight, not in nice terms. He called him an idiot and a, quote, nut job. Also, remember when the head of Trump's transition told me that RFK Jr. would not be getting a position in charge of a health agency? Well, will he?
How good was Bobby Kennedy Jr.? He's going to take care of women.